Welcome to the architectural series, Architects Talk or Conversations with Architects. Today we have a very distinguished guest, Mr. King Young, and welcome to Turkey, welcome to our series. I think it's not the first time that you are in Turkey, so you are quite familiar with Turkey and Istanbul.
Yes, well, thank you, Abdi. I'm very happy to be here.
In one of your websites, I'm quoting now, you are saying, I'm an ecologist first, an architect second. Why do you call yourself being an ecologist before being an architect?
Well, when I wrote my PhD, I had to study ecology. And so after doing that, I joined the British Ecological Society, so I became an ecologist. But at the end of the day...
So it's a real title?
Oh, yeah. But you know, there are many societies. This is just one of them. I mean, there are many ecological societies. This is just one of them. But I think the environment is much more... There are two types of environment. There's the built environment, which is architecture, and there's the natural environment, which is ecology. I think the natural environment has to take precedent over the built environment.
And that's what you are trying to do, as far as I know. I mean, you are trying to integrate these two different environments in one.
Yes.
And you call it ecological architecture.
Yes, ecological design, yes.
Ecological design. So
yes.
Can you just open up a little bit? What do you mean by ecological design?
Ecological design is different from conventional design with only one difference. The environment becomes one of the considerations in design. And the environment is not just climate, but it includes everything that is natural. And ecology is defined as the study of organisms in the environment. And in the environment, there are a multitude of organisms. There are flora and fauna. And within the biosphere, there are units in nature called ecosystems. And ecosystems consist of communities of plants and animals acting together to form a whole. And that's the environment for me.
But as far as, I mean, we all know, since Vitruvius, architecture has always been sensitive to ecology and nature and, let's say, what comes with nature. So being friendly with nature or having such a continuity with nature had always been an issue for good architecture, at least, or for timeless way of building. So were there a rupture or something's changed in the way that, I mean, we are recalling ecological architecture?
No. Not every architect designs with nature. A lot of architects just forget about nature. They just go a piece of land and clear the land and build whatever they want. Well, that's not recognizing nature. That's not even Vitruvius. And so we have to start by looking at the location where we're designing. Location has its own climate. And so we need to design, first of all, what are called bioclimatic buildings. Buildings that respond to the climate and make use of the ambient energy of location. And that it should be a low energy structure before you put any electrical and technological systems in. Then using that as an armature, as a scaffold, then everything else we do is to enhance its ecological impact. But not all sites are the same. A lot of architects think that, you know, this piece of land here, piece of land there, every site is different. Now, if you build in a city, that's fine, because in a city, the land has been cleared, the topsoil is gone. You don't really need to think too much about ecology, except the climate effects of your building on the climate, the effects of your building on surrounding buildings. But if you're building in the countryside, every part of the earth is different. So you have to look at the soil, because soil is a very valuable resource. If you scrape the soil and throw it away, then you lost a valuable resource, because soils of microbes have nutrients, you know, which enable plants to grow. And so whenever we design outside the city, we have to understand the ecology of the land before we put anything upon it. Now tell me how many architects do that? Very few.
I think what you are mentioning is a sense of contextuality.
That's only one aspect of ecological architecture.
Yeah,
that's a multitude of other aspects.
It's inevitable, I mean, in good architecture at least. But however, I mean, there is the issue of planning. Before coming to the architectural scale, many things are set up within the city scale. So, I mean, there is a very little room for the architect to operate. I mean, once all the givens of the building are known, the density, the orientation, I mean, concentration, whatever it is, it becomes very difficult to move.
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
Because not all cities are planned the same.
Mm-hmm.
Not all cities have the same planning constraints. A lot of architects think that all I do is put plants on balconies.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you said earlier on.
Yeah.
But we don't just do that. I have a lot of imitators. They think they just put plants in buildings and that's good enough. We try and design our buildings as what I call constructed ecosystems. In our buildings, we create habitats within it. Mm-hmm. Habitats are particular areas where different species live. We do research on the fauna that we want to bring back into that site. Because the city has been previously, before the built city, it used to be a forest, it used to be a natural land. Human beings go on cities and just scrape the land and convert it into something which is totally denatured. So what I try to do is to bring diversity back into the city, but I have different approaches for different sites. For the city, I have one approach. For the suburban area, another approach. For the pristine countryside, I have another approach. And so within the city, what we try to do is that to enhance the biodiversity and design our building and our development as an ecosystem. In other words, we try to create habitats within our buildings. And the habitats could be green walls, could be green roofs, could be green atriums, could be green patches on the ground, could be constructed wetland, could be biospheres. And so with these habitats, we try and select the native fauna that we want to bring back.
Which will make them sustainable in their own
Having
climate.
identified a native fauna, we want to bring them back for three reasons. For refuge, for feeding, for breeding. Mm-hmm. And then, in order to attract the fauna into our habitats, we choose the flora to attract the fauna. So we having identified the native flora that will attract the native fauna, then we create landscape conditions within our buildings, within those habitats, and enable these species to survive over the 4 seasons of the year. So in this way, our buildings are not just denatured structures where you just plonk vegetation or flowers or onto the building, but we create habitats so the whole building itself becomes an ecosystem.
Whenever you start to bring academia and practice together, that's always the problem. I mean, nobody wants to pay for the academic research part of the project, but it's inevitable, I believe. What is the organization of the office? You have a head office in Malaysia, as far as I know.
I have Malaysia. I have an office here. In there, we have employed about 80 people. We have an office in London, about 20 plus people. And we have 5 offices in China with about 300 people.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's much. So most of the projects are in China now, is it?
No. Most of the projects are in Malaysia and elsewhere. What we try to do is that we cannot do everything in the scope of work ourselves. Mm-hmm. So we do the design, we do the design development, and then we do what we call design intent drawings, which are generic construction details. Mm-hmm. And then we have, for every country we work in, we have a local architect to work with us.
You are subcontracting or working together?
Collaborating. They'll take my design intent drawings, convert that into detailed drawings. But in the process, because ecological architecture is not just doing drawings, but you have to check the systems, check how everything works. And so we have to be involved at every stage of the process, from the time we design to the time it's completed, to make sure that everything complies with what we set out to do in the first instance.
I see. This issue of ecology, environmental sensitivity, has always been a kind of let's say, Western philosophy or issue that has been flourished in the developed countries because of the problems that has been created by the technology or something else. But one of the leading architects in this field, you are coming from the Eastern culture and Eastern societies. How do you explain this conflict or, this coincidence, let's say?
Well, this is what I ask myself all the time, am I East or West or somewhere in between? I was born in Malaysia, When I was 12 years old, I left Malaysia to go to study UK.
Yeah, I know.
And so, you know, I have as much Malaysian as I'm British.
Uh-huh.
You know, so it is, I have what you call my first passport is a British passport.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I'm neither East nor West, but somewhere in between.
But it's also very important to understand both parts at a time, I think, both cultures at a time. It's a kind of a richness, isn't it so? I don't know. How do you see it?
I don't know. It's like, how do I look at myself? I think it's important to, the most important aspect actually is not the richness in the culture. The most interesting aspect is the sense of humor.
Sense of humor, yeah.
The Asians have one particular sense of humor. The English have another sense of humor. The French and the Americans have different sense of humor. So once we understand the sense of humor, then the relationships become very, very, very effective.
I think that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Mr. Ken Yang, thank you very much for being with us. I mean, it was a pleasure to be with you.
Yes.
Would you like to add anything else that I forgot to say or you want to underline?
Well, as I mentioned earlier on, one of the biggest issues today for me is that the present generation of architects who are already in practice have no background in ecology. And so to try and persuade them to tell them to do something else is extremely difficult. And this is a whole generation of architects which are in practice today. With the next generation of architects who become ecological architects. But the present generation are very arrogant. You know, they say that they don't understand what I'm talking about, and that is the biggest issue I have to confront. I've been doing ecological architecture for 40 years now, since 1971.
But things are changing. I mean,
for 30 years it was extremely difficult because people didn't really understand what I was talking about. And that only about maybe 10, 15 years ago, engineers started to give support to me in ecological design, on the engineering aspects. Then I found the ecologists and landscape architects start to understand what I'm doing, and there are about a dozen or even several dozen landscape architects in the world who will work with me and help me with ecology and the landscape aspects of it. And so in many, and there are planners as well who work with us. So in many ways, right now, I'm having the time of my life. I have clients coming to me because they seriously want to have a green master plan, seriously want to have green buildings, and I do my best for them. But in my life, I realized there's a whole agenda of green aspects, theoretical, design interpretation, the technological aspects of it, and the application and the construction.
Academic, yeah.
Which I can never address in my whole lifetime. So I try and do as much as I can before I start pushing daisies. Pushing daisies and stuff. Okay. And so, I like to end by quoting my favorite cartoon, favorite puppet. You must have heard of Sesame Street.
Yeah, I know that. Yes.
Sesame Street, there's a frog called Kermit.
Yeah.
It's green.
It's our generation.
It's
maybe younger wouldn't remember it. Or
do you know the song that Kermit sings? It's not easy being green.
It's a different reference, but it's adaptable, I think. Right. That's very good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.